Thandi comes from a family of teachers and for more than 10 years was a teacher in various secondary schools in Soweto. She has been involved in numerous development projects in organizations and now was later deputy of the Director General of Education in the government of Gauteng. She's currently is a chairperson of MIET Africa. It is a great honor, Mrs. Thandi, to have you among us in this Ubuntu Summit. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Greetings to all dignitaries as articulated by Professor Volmink. Greetings to all participants of the Ubuntu Dialogue. It is fascinating to celebrate the United Nations Peace Day in a time when peace is being challenged throughout the world. Ubuntu is a gift of Africa to the world, a gift that we were given as Africa over centuries, a gift that we need to make infectious to the whole world. How do you see a gift? A gift is something you cherish. A gift is something you love. A gift is something you preserve. And it is interesting that Ubuntu means love, peace, happiness, eternal optimism in a very pessimistic world, inner goodness in a world that is destructive. It is just but a human virtue. I always say the one thing is whether you live Ubuntu, you cannot take it as a concept. You have to live it out on your daily life. The one thing that Mandela left us with is resilience. Resilience against adversity. And as we face a number of adversities in the world, how resilient are we as an interconnected humanity to face these adversities? Mandela left us with a gift of motivation in Ubuntu, of keeping to motivate each other. As we fall, we begin to rise again. He inspired every young person to take responsibility. And I always paraphrase his quotation as he went to prison. This is an ideal I am prepared to live for, and an ideal I am prepared to die for. Are we prepared to accept the gift, to live for the gift of Ubuntu, but to also die for the gift of Ubuntu? Desmond Tutu chatted us through difficult times, a time when we couldn't reconcile. And it is this time when we need that reconciliation. We need that reconciliation in countries that are bombing each other, in countries where women and children are running for their lives. How do we make this gift become available to all? The problem the world has is that we only think of ourselves frequently as individuals. We always think of ourselves as how powerful are we. We are separated from each other. And yet we are particles, just but particles that make the universe. And once each particle is off the other, it gets disconnected. Ubuntu as a gift is a divine spark that we have to receive and to appreciate. From the beginning of time, Ubuntu has guided African societies. And that is why in Africa, whether you are a stranger, I will welcome you into my home. Whether you are a stranger, I will share the smallest meal I have because you're part of me. What I have is yours, and what is yours is mine. What can the world then benefit from Ubuntu as a way of life? It can make us change the world order. What we have seen in the world is that power and resources make what leaders of the world think is what we should be having. And yet, throughout this pandemic, there is a lesson we are learning. We have broken from each other. We cannot hug each other. We cannot hold each other. We cannot touch each other. We feel disconnected. It's not only a disease, it's the disconnection. Others will die just out of the anxiety, just out of the loneliness, because humanity is a connected entity. Once it gets disconnected, then it does not operate with each other. We are looking at big and mighty nations with resources, holding the vaccine as a gift to actually save others. Africa sits and says, how can we be helped? So much has been taken away from us. How can the gift not come back to us? And this, I know the United Nations fights to say, how can we make sure that all those vaccines are also received by those who do not have? And that would be an act of Ubuntu, because Ubuntu is because you are, because I am. Now, how can you be if I'm not there? Ubuntu is alive and lived in the African continent with all the challenges that Africa faces. We are sometimes looking at ashes in Africa of devastation. But Africa continues to rise and continues to rise. It only begins to rise simply because it's got Ubuntu. And that is the gift we give to the world. I always want to quote Mandela again. As he left prison, I quote, as I walked out of the door towards my freedom, I knew that if I did not leave all the anger, hatred, bitterness behind, I would still be in prison. The world is in prison simply because it refuses to engulf Ubuntu by forgiveness, by empathy, by compassion, by loving the next person, by breaking this division and becoming united in our diversity. I know that the Ubuntu Academy Network works so hard to begin to infuse to our young people, to build bridges in community, embrace humanity, and form one umbrella to move forward in confidence for a better future. But I'm asking you today to not only build bridges, but become the bridge yourself. Because servant leadership says, unless you lie and I can walk over you to get to the other side, then you are not the bridge I want you to be. Servant leadership means we have to increase the service of ethics of care to the rest of the world. How do we show ethics of care? Again, the pandemic has given us a window. If you look at all those healthcare givers who sacrificed at risk to save the lives of others, those were Ubuntu bridge builders. And we need to claim them as Ubuntu bridge builders because that's what they were. They gave of themselves in order that humanity may survive. They gave a holistic approach, and that is the approach we all need, an approach that says we're not looking at bits of what we need to solve in the world. We're looking at the whole of humanity. We're looking at how we treasure the resources like climate, how we see a gift in nature, because unless we preserve all of that as part of our humanity, we are not going to be able to move forward. And for all of us, the challenge is actually to speak truth to power. We are so afraid of power that we are dependent on leaders, on governments. We haven't taken ownership that we're particles of the whole. There isn't a government without its people. The sharing of power is partly going to be what Ubuntu is about. In Ubuntu, you are not a chief. You are a chief because there are people who make you the chief. And that's how Africa started. The chief depends on its people. Now, if those who lead us cannot understand that we are the people until we are part of this change and part of decision making, the world cannot move forward. It is not about you, it's about the whole of humanity. And the reconciliation and restorative justice we have watched in our own country shows that social harmony is possible. And it does not mean we will not come into conflict. Even children of the same family do go into conflict. But how do we find harmony and forgiveness when we have hurt each other? And the truth and reconciliation, I can tell you, I do not know how this gift was so infectious, because we had an angry people who wanted blood for blood and eye for an eye. But Mandela and Tutu managed to maneuver us through the process of difficulty in order for us to come to a harmonious, where victims and oppressors can sit around one table and find a common denominator of humanity to move forward. I want us to recall that it is not very far ago, a couple of days, we celebrated 25 years of the genocide that happened in Rwanda. And that was interesting for me to watch a victim and the survivor of that genocide read a book, and I would motivate you to look at it on YouTube. Immaculée Ilili Bangazi writes in his book, Left to Tell, that I watched them kill my family one by one. I stayed for 135 days in one small pit. But when I came out of it and came out of hiding, I came back to a country torn. And mine was not to revenge. Mine was to make sure that the perpetrators find peace by forgiving them and giving them a lease. That is Ubuntu, a gift from Africa, a model to watch. Today, we do not talk of Hutsis and Tutsis. We talk of Rwandese, meaning there is a possibility that we can, as a world, refer to each other as one world in real terms. It is interesting that throughout these lockdowns and throughout the pressures we have had, Africa, again, coming from my own country, sent a dance, Jerusalem, and everybody danced without understanding the language, without understanding the meaning, just humanity danced. So we can use music, we can use anything to actually infuse that oneness. That dance was done all over the world because people needed to dance to humanity, to dance to the oneness. And that is what we're lacking. And that is what we need to do. And I hope today, as we mark this important day, we move away, each one of us, saying, I'm going to take one step of Ubuntu. I'm going to live it in my daily life. My dream is that my grandchildren will live in a world where Ubuntu is a way of life. My dream is that the Ubuntu Academy becomes part of an initiative that is done by every university, by every school throughout the world, so that we plant the foundation now at the beginning with each child. My dream is that in every family, the values of Ubuntu become family values. I thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Thandi Shen. You inspiring our journey. Thank you so much.